The scrap assignment. The humans stood in silence, looking at the fleet of ships before them. It was a cold, gray morning, and the air was thick with tension. They had just received their mission, but no one had any illusions about it. The assignment was a joke. They had been sent to war with nothing more than scraps. Old, damaged, outdated technology. It was almost laughable. The high-ranking officers and their superiors had made it clear that this would be a one-way trip, a mission designed to fail. In the heart of the human camp, a leader named Captain Amelia Hayes stood in front of her team, trying to keep her calm. Her face was serious, but deep down, she could feel the weight of the situation. She had been given the impossible task of leading a Galactic group of soldiers against an enemy fleet that was known for its immense power and advanced technology. The aliens they were going to fight had weapons far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. In comparison, the humans had nothing but broken-down war machines, old tanks, and barely functioning ships. Junk. "I know what you're all thinking," Captain Hayes began, looking at the worried faces of her soldiers. "But this isn't just about the odds. It's about survival. We don't need fancy weapons or advanced technology. We have something they don't. We have the will to fight." Her words were meant to inspire, but the doubt was still in the air. They had been given no choice but to fight with what they had. As the soldiers began to prepare for battle, they couldn't help but wonder if they were walking into certain death. The fleet they would face was a powerful alien empire, well-equipped and ruthless. They didn't stand a chance, or so it seemed. The humans had been put in this position not by choice, but by necessity. Earth had been under threat for months, and after several failed attempts to negotiate peace, the human leaders had decided to send their military to stop the alien invasion. But there was one problem. Earth didn't have the resources to wage war on such a scale. The war machines they had were outdated, and their best ships had been lost in previous skirmishes. All they had left were scraps. The engineers worked day and night, trying to repair and upgrade what they could. They scavenged what they could find, piecing together old tanks, rusted fighter jets, and broken spacecraft. What they came up with was a collection of machines that looked more like junkyard leftovers than military vehicles. But they had no other choice. Among the soldiers was Sergeant Lucas Carter, a young man who had only joined the military a few years ago. He wasn't sure what he had gotten himself into, but he couldn't back out now. Lucas had grown up hearing about humanity's greatest moments, the heroes who had fought for freedom. But now it felt like those stories were nothing but legends. He stared at the battered ship he had been assigned to, wondering how it would even make it into space, let alone survive a full-scale battle. "You ready?" A voice called out from behind him. It was Sergeant Mia Chen, a veteran soldier who had seen her fair share of battles. She gave him a small grin, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I don't know, Mia," Lucas said, shaking his head. "This feels like we're walking into a slaughterhouse." Mia looked at him, her expression hardening. "Maybe. But we don't get to decide how it ends. All we can do is fight. It's what we've always done, right?" Lucas nodded. He didn't have any words to respond. There was no glory in this mission, no victory to dream about. There was only survival. As they boarded their ships and prepared for departure, the humans couldn't help but feel the weight of their situation. They were the underdogs, sent to face an enemy that outclassed them in every way. But Captain Hayes knew that the key to victory wouldn't come from their technology. It would come from their resourcefulness. She had seen it before. Humans could do the impossible when they were pushed to their limits. They were resilient, creative, and relentless. If there was any hope, it was in their ability to adapt and innovate on the fly. "Remember," Captain Hayes addressed her team one last time before they launched. "We may be outgunned, outnumbered, and underprepared, but we are not weak. We have something they don't. We have each other, and we will fight until the end." With those words, the humans set out on their journey, their ships lifting off into the unknown. As they left Earth's atmosphere, there was no cheering, no celebration, Only silence. They were heading toward a battle that could mean the end of humanity. It wasn't just a mission anymore. It was their last chance. As the fleet sped toward the enemy's territory, Captain Hayes stared out the window of her command ship. The void of space stretched out before her, cold and unforgiving. She couldn't afford to let her doubts show. The lives of her soldiers depended on her ability to stay strong. But even as she fought to keep her resolve, a small part of her couldn't help but wonder if they were truly ready for the fight ahead. Their mission was impossible. They were sent to war with nothing but scrap. But Captain Hayes was determined to prove that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit could triumph. And if they were to go down, they would do so fighting with everything they had. Preparing for the impossible. The atmosphere inside the human fleet was thick with uncertainty. The mission was more than just a fight. It was humanity's last stand. Captain Hayes stood in the command center of the flagship, the metallic hum of the ship filling the air. Every corner of the vessel was occupied by soldiers, engineers, and technicians working tirelessly. They had no luxury of time. The alien forces were on their way, and they would be there soon. In the makeshift repair bay, Sergeant Lucas Carter and his team were working on the ship that would carry them into battle. The craft looked like a relic from a past age. Its hull was pitted with dents, its wings warped and patched with pieces of scrap metal. It was held together by a fragile mix of old technology and desperation. Yet, Lucas found something strangely inspiring in the sight. This battered vessel was all they had, and somehow, it was going to have to be enough. "Looks like we might be able to make it fly after all," Maya said, wiping grease from her hands. Her tone was gruff, but not without a hint of optimism. She had been in situations like this before, where the odds were stacked against them, and the mission seemed impossible. But this was different. No one had expected the human fleet to make it this far. "We don't have much time," Lucas replied, staring at the screen in front of him, where data from their ship's systems was flickering erratically. The weapons were barely functional. The shields were weak, and the engines, well, they were a miracle if they could hold together for even one trip. Mia raised an eyebrow. "You really think we can win with this junk?" Lucas smiled bitterly. "I don't think we have a choice." Outside the ship, the rest of the fleet was in various states of repair. Some ships looked barely operational, while others had been stripped down to their frames, awaiting new parts. The soldiers were doing their best to prepare for the impossible, but there was a sense of grim acceptance in the air. It wasn't just about fixing machines. It was about believing they could fight with what they had, even when it seemed like there was no hope. Back in the command center, Captain Hayes was reviewing the battle plan. She had a feeling the war wouldn't be won in a traditional way. They couldn't take on the aliens head-on with brute force. Their strength wasn't in their numbers or their weapons. It was in their minds. Human ingenuity was the only weapon they had left. "Listen up, everyone," Hayes' voice echoed through the fleet's comms system. The room went silent as every soldier and officer tuned in. "I know what you're all thinking. We're outgunned. We're outnumbered. And yes, we're fighting with nothing but scraps. But we are not defeated. We will fight smart. We will fight together. And we will use every advantage we have. Every single thing that the enemy thinks we don't have, we will turn it into our strength." She paused for a moment, her eyes scanning the faces of her officers on the monitor. "The aliens think we're weak. They think we're too small and too primitive. But they're wrong. We may not have their weapons, but we have the one thing they'll never understand: the will to survive." The crew in the room looked at each other, a glimmer of hope flickering in their eyes. No one had believed in them, and that's exactly why they were going to succeed. The days leading up to the battle were a whirlwind of preparations. The humans were still building their defenses with whatever they could find. Old tanks were retrofitted with energy shields made from scavenged alien tech. They stripped down their fighter jets and replaced their weapons with makeshift laser cannons. Even their infantry units were given basic armor made from whatever they could scrape together. But each suit had something extra: ingenuity. These weren't just soldiers. They were creators, innovators, and survivors. It wasn't long before the fleet received word that the aliens were closing in. The feeling of dread was palpable, but Hayes knew there was no turning back now. They had to fight. She called another meeting to finalize their strategy. "Here's the plan," she began, her voice steady. "We're not going to take them head-on. Our ships are too slow, and we're outmatched in firepower. But we have something they don't: our knowledge of the terrain and our adaptability. We're going to use guerrilla tactics. We'll hit them where it hurts." She paused to make sure the team was following. "We'll send a small squadron to engage in the initial fight. It's not about winning right away. It's about drawing their forces into a trap. We'll use the scrap-built ships to create confusion. We'll hit them with everything we've got, and then vanish. The key is surprise." Sergeant Carter looked at the map of the battlefield on his screen. His brow furrowed. "So, we're playing chicken. If it means getting them to underestimate us, then yes," Hayes replied. "We need to make them think we're nothing more than a nuisance. When they do, that's when we strike." The soldiers nodded, each one understanding the high stakes. They were about to face the most advanced alien forces in the galaxy, and the best they could hope for was that the enemy would believe they were insignificant. But as the days passed, something shifted. The more they worked together, the more they believed in themselves. They were starting to see the potential in the impossible task that lay ahead. As the final preparations were made and the human fleet readied for launch, there was an unexpected sense of camaraderie. The soldiers, once doubtful and afraid, were now united by a single purpose: to prove that even the most hopeless of situations could be turned into victory. The clock was ticking, and the humans knew they had no time to waste. The aliens would be arriving soon, and the fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. But the humans didn't just want to survive. They wanted to show the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. Captain Hayes looked out at the fleet one last time before they made their final jump. Her voice was calm, but there was fire in her words. "We may have been sent here with nothing but scrap, but we are going to make them regret ever thinking we were weak. Let's make history." And so, with their scrap-built ships and their will to survive, the humans prepared to face the unknown. They didn't have the luxury of time or the best weapons, but they had something far more powerful: the strength to fight against all odds. The battle was about to begin, and no one could predict how it would end. But the humans were ready to give everything they had. Into the fire. The vastness of space seemed infinite, but for Captain Hayes and her crew, it had never felt smaller. The enemy fleet, a vast armada of alien warships, loomed in the distance, their dark silhouettes visible against the backdrop of distant stars. As the human fleet prepared to engage, there was a sense of calm before the storm. Every soldier, every officer, every mechanic, and every pilot knew the stakes. They weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting for survival, for their very existence. "Here we go," Hayes muttered to herself as she took her seat at the command center. Her fingers hovered above the control panel, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. With a quick glance at the tactical map, she set her eyes forward, bracing herself for what was about to unfold. On the bridge of one of the scrap-built ships, Sergeant Lucas Carter and his team were preparing for their first mission. They had been selected for the most dangerous task: infiltrating the enemy's front lines, using their outdated craft to draw attention and create chaos. The ship's engine roared to life, and Carter couldn't help but smile. "Ready for this?" Maya asked, her voice filled with a mix of anticipation and fear. Carter nodded. "We don't have a choice, do we?" Mia gave a sharp laugh, gripping the controls tightly. "Guess not. Just stay alive, all right." As the engines hummed and the ship shuddered, they joined the rest of the human fleet in their final approach to the enemy lines. The first phase of the plan was simple: hit hard, draw fire, and create as much confusion as possible. It wasn't about defeating the alien fleet head-on. It was about surviving long enough to make them believe the humans were nothing more than a nuisance. The countdown began. The moment the signal was given, the human fleet surged forward, their scrap-built ships tearing through the void, their weapons sputtering to life. They were far from impressive, but to the enemy, they looked like nothing more than a collection of outdated and broken vessels. The aliens, confident in their technological superiority, were ready to squash the humans like bugs. But as the first shots were fired, something changed. The humans weren't backing down. The scrap ships weaved and dodged with an agility that was almost impossible to believe, avoiding alien blasts with uncanny precision. The aliens couldn't understand how these ships, made from what seemed like junk, could evade their advanced weaponry. "We've got their attention," Carter said, his voice filled with both excitement and disbelief as he watched an enemy warship fire past them. The sound of explosions and the hum of weapons fire filled the air. Every second was a gamble, and the odds were stacked against them. But they had one advantage. The aliens had underestimated them. Back in the command center, Captain Hayes watched the unfolding chaos with a calculated focus. The enemy was taking the bait, just as they had planned. Their attention was divided, their fire concentrated on the small, agile ships that darted in and out of their reach. The rest of the fleet, hidden in the shadows of nearby asteroids, remained poised and ready to strike. Phase 2, now, Hayes ordered. The humans were no longer the prey. They were the hunters. The moment the signal was given, the larger human ships emerged from hiding, unleashing a barrage of fire that hit the alien fleet with devastating accuracy. The aliens had been caught off guard. Their formations were broken, their ships damaged, and confusion spread like wildfire. For a moment, the humans had the upper hand. They didn't have the firepower or the strength, but they had strategy, and that was something the aliens had never accounted for. "Target the engines," Hayes shouted as the battle raged on. "We need to disable their ships, not destroy them." On the battlefield, Lucas and his crew were still evading enemy fire, dodging lasers and missile blasts that seemed to be coming from all directions. Every move felt like it could be their last, but the human resolve was unyielding. They had come too far to fail now. Suddenly, a loud alarm blared throughout their ship, and the screens in front of them flashed red. An alien warship had locked onto their position, and it was closing in fast. Mia's hand shot to the controls, desperately trying to shake the alien vessel off their tail. Come on," she muttered, sweat beading on her forehead. The ship jolted as it dodged another blast, but the alien ship was persistent. It fired again, this time grazing their wing. The whole ship shuddered, and Carter gritted his teeth. "We're not going down like this," he said, slamming his fist against the control panel. "Mia, give it everything we've got." Mia looked at him, determination blazing in her eyes. "Hold on tight." With a roar, the ship lurched forward, using every ounce of power left to charge straight at the enemy vessel. For a split second, it seemed like a suicide move. But as the distance between them closed, Mia pulled the ship into a sudden dive, skimming just beneath the alien warship's weapons range. The alien ship, caught off guard, overshot its target, firing wildly into the empty space ahead of them. The human ship shot upward, using the enemy's momentary miscalculation to escape. Carter let out a relieved laugh, but they both knew that this was far from over. They were still outgunned, still fighting with nothing but scrap. But in that moment, it felt like they were on the verge of something bigger. In the command center, Hayes monitored the progress, her mind racing with calculations. The enemy was regrouping, preparing for a counterattack. The human fleet had managed to create enough confusion to throw off the aliens, but they couldn't afford to lose their advantage. "Keep the pressure on," she ordered. "We're not letting them recover. Not now, not ever." As the battle raged on, it became clear to everyone involved. The humans were no longer the underdogs. They were playing a game that the aliens had never considered, using their resourcefulness, their ingenuity, and their never-give-up attitude to turn the tide of the war. It wasn't about having the best technology. It was about using what they had to outthink and outfight the enemy. And in that moment, as explosions lit up the battlefield and the humans fought with everything they had, it became clear that this war wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that even when sent into the fire with nothing but junk, humanity could still rise up and dominate the battlefield. The tipping point. The battle raged on, and the human fleet, once seen as nothing more than an annoyance by the alien forces, had turned the tide. Every passing minute brought a new challenge, but also new opportunities for the humans to prove themselves. The scrap-built ships, battered and worn, had become the symbol of human resilience. They may have been built from discarded parts and outdated technology, but they were proving to be more than a match for the advanced alien forces. On the ground, the soldiers who had once feared their own inferiority were now stepping into their roles with an unshakable sense of purpose. Sergeant Carter and his crew had become legends, not because of their firepower, but because of their unwavering belief that they could win against all odds. Every time they thought they might be outmatched, they found a way to outthink their enemy, turning the tables in ways that no one could predict. Back on the bridge of Captain Hayes' flagship, the atmosphere was tense. The initial success had been overwhelming, but now the aliens were regrouping, their massive warships reforming their ranks. They were adapting quickly, and it was clear that they would stop underestimating the humans. The advantage they had gained was slipping away, and it was only a matter of time before the enemy would unleash their full might. "Prepare for counterattack," Hayes said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of the situation. The stakes were higher than ever now. They couldn't afford to slip up. As the humans took their positions, the alien armada charged forward with a ferocity that seemed impossible to match. Their ships, sleek and terrifying, fired a volley of lasers and missiles that filled the space between them and the human fleet. The onslaught was relentless, a barrage of light and destruction aimed at wiping the humans off the map. Sergeant Carter's team was already back in action, racing to get into position once again. Their ship, a clunky and mismatched hunk of metal, barely held together from the previous battle, was now surrounded by enemy vessels. The crew could feel the tension in the air, but they also knew they had one thing the aliens didn't: unpredictability. "Do we have enough fuel to make the jump?" Carter asked, glancing over at Mia, his eyes sharp. Every second mattered, and they had to act fast. Mia didn't hesitate. "We've got enough for one more, but it's a long shot. We need to get close enough to their flagship to make this count." The plan was a risky one. They were going to use their ship's unconventional propulsion system to close the gap between them and the alien flagship. It was a maneuver that no one would expect from a ship built out of scrap. But then again, no one had expected the humans to still be alive this long either. The enemy fleet's command ship loomed ahead, massive and imposing. Every other ship in the Armada moved in perfect formation around it. As they prepared to launch their next assault, Carter and his team were ready to take a bold risk. "We'll need to get in close enough for a direct attack," Carter said, his voice steady despite the storm of weapons fire surrounding them. "We hit their command ship. We break their coordination. It's our only shot." Mia nodded, pulling the controls to full throttle. The ship lurched forward, darting and weaving as missiles and lasers shot past them, some of them grazing their hull. Carter gritted his teeth and held on tight as they neared the flagship, the alien ships giving chase. The humans had become their quarry, and they couldn't afford to let them escape. On the flagship, Captain Hayes watched the situation unfold with a mixture of pride and concern. She knew this was a crucial moment in the battle. Carter and his team were risking everything on a single desperate move. The humans had never fought like this before, using every weapon, every trick, every resource available to them. It wasn't a conventional fight, but then again, the humans had never been conventional. "All ships, engage at will," Hayes ordered. "We don't stop until we've taken them down." The human fleet, still a patchwork of different designs and scraps, surged forward, targeting the alien ship's engines and communication arrays. The aliens, now desperate, began firing indiscriminately, their once organized formations breaking apart as they tried to eliminate the human threat. Carter's ship, now just a few hundred meters from the alien flagship, was moving like a snake through the chaos, its worn hull gleaming under the onslaught of enemy fire. Maya's hands danced over the controls as she executed a series of impossible maneuvers, dodging lasers and missiles that seemed to come from every direction. "Get ready," Carter shouted. "This is it." Maya gritted her teeth, knowing that the next few seconds could be their last, but they had come too far to back down now. The moment they closed the distance, they would make their move. Everything depended on this. The ship closed in, and just as the alien flagship prepared to fire on them, Carter hit the button that activated their last, desperate gambit, a powerful electromagnetic pulse designed to disable the enemy ship's weapons and communication systems. The blast of energy shot out from the human ship, creating a shockwave that rattled the alien fleet. For a moment, everything went silent. The alien flagship was crippled, its weapons systems knocked offline, its crew scrambling to regain control. The human ship had successfully executed the impossible, disrupting the command of the enemy forces in one fell swoop. "We did it," Maya shouted, her voice a mixture of relief and triumph. But Carter wasn't celebrating. His eyes were still fixed on the chaos around them. The battle was far from over. The enemy fleet, now in disarray, was still a dangerous force. The humans had gained the upper hand, but they needed to press on before the aliens recovered. In the command center, Hayes smiled grimly. The humans had just made their mark on the battlefield. Against all odds, they had disrupted the enemy's plan. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were fighting back. They were taking control. "Let's finish this," Hayes said, her voice resolute. And with that, the humans pushed forward, knowing that they had already achieved the impossible, defying expectations and turning the tide of a war that had once seemed unwinnable. The battlefield was theirs to claim. The turning point. As the dust of battle settled, the human fleet pressed forward with a newfound confidence. The blast from their electromagnetic pulse had crippled the alien flagship, but this victory had done more than just disable an enemy vessel. It had shattered the perception the galaxy had of humanity. What had started as a mission for survival was now evolving into a full-scale fight for dominance. Captain Hayes stood on the bridge of the flagship, her gaze fixed on the aftermath of the EMP strike. The alien armada, now disoriented and scattered, was regrouping. It wouldn't take long for the aliens to adapt, but this was humanity's moment. The tide had turned. She could feel it in the air, a sense of determination and unity that hadn't been there before. The humans had always been resourceful, but now they were becoming a force to be reckoned with. "All ships, report in," Hayes ordered. Her voice was steady, but a fire had kindled within her. She knew they had broken the enemy's confidence, but now they had to finish what they had started. One by one, the human ships signaled in. "Ready for the final push, Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Morgan, his ship's sensors picking up on the alien fleet's weakened state. "We're not out of the woods yet," Hayes reminded them. "We have to move fast before they recover." Meanwhile, on the surface, Sergeant Carter and his squad were preparing for a new challenge. The EMP strike had disabled the alien flagship, but the ground troops, who had already experienced the human ingenuity firsthand, weren't backing down. The aliens knew their defeat was imminent, but they would fight to the bitter end. The human forces were ready. What they lacked in advanced technology, they made up for with adaptability and determination. As they geared up for another assault, Carter couldn't help but think about how far they had come. From scraps to strategists, from underdogs to leaders, humanity had risen from the depths of despair. "Keep your heads on a swivel," Carter instructed his team, loading his rifle with a practiced hand. "This won't be a cakewalk, just like the last one." Maya asked, smirking. "We've been through worse," Carter replied, his eyes scanning the battlefield. The wreckage of alien ships scattered across the landscape was a reminder of what they had already accomplished, but it was also a sign that the war was far from over. The aliens were regrouping, and soon they'd be back in full force. They had underestimated the humans, but now the tables had turned. The battlefield was about to become a proving ground for human resilience and resourcefulness. The alien forces had brought their best, but the humans had brought something more valuable: their will to survive. "All units, prepare to move out," Carter ordered. "We're going to hit them hard and fast. We can't let them reorganize." As the team moved out, Carter's mind raced. There was one thing he knew for sure. The aliens wouldn't expect humanity to keep fighting. But they were wrong. They were wrong about the scrap-built ships. They were wrong about the soldiers. They were wrong about humanity as a whole. The aliens had no idea what they were up against. Back on the flagship, Hayes was already preparing for the next phase. She had watched as her forces fought with everything they had, and she knew they couldn't stop now. The enemy might have been powerful, but their arrogance had been their downfall. "Captain," said Lieutenant Morgan, his eyes glued to the holographic display, "the enemy is retreating to their secondary command base on the fourth moon. It's heavily fortified." "Then we go after it," Hayes replied without hesitation. "We hit them at their weakest point and take away their ability to regroup. We're not letting them escape." The human fleet turned toward the fourth moon, a cold, barren world that had once been the site of alien dominance. Now it was about to become the site of their defeat. As the ships approached, Hayes could feel the weight of the moment. The humans had no choice but to push forward. There would be no turning back. Sergeant Carter's squad was already on the move, scaling the jagged cliffs of the moon's surface. They were preparing for an assault unlike any they had faced before. Their objective was clear: neutralize the alien command center and cripple their ability to wage war. As Carter led his team through the rocky terrain, he could hear the hum of enemy weapons in the distance. The aliens were preparing for their final stand, but the humans weren't intimidated. Not anymore. Their victory on the battlefield had changed everything. The humans knew they were no longer the underdogs. They were the apex predators. "Stay sharp, everyone," Carter said, his voice grim. "This is it. We take the command center, and it's over for them." The team moved forward, closing in on their target. The enemy was waiting for them, but Carter's squad wasn't the same as the one that had started the war. They were faster, smarter, and more deadly than the aliens could have ever anticipated. As they breached the command center's defenses, it became clear: humanity wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to win. The alien forces attempted to regroup, but their efforts were in vain. The humans had broken their command structure, destroyed their leadership, and now, with the final assault underway, the aliens had no choice but to surrender. Carter looked out over the battlefield. The humans had done the impossible. They had won. Against all odds, they had taken the war to the aliens and emerged victorious. The battlefield was theirs. Back on the human flagship, Captain Hayes watched as the last remnants of the alien fleet were wiped out. It had been a long, hard fight, but they had succeeded. The war was over. The humans had ruled the battlefield, just as they had always known they would. And in the end, the aliens had learned one irrefutable truth: never underestimate humanity. The rebirth of the Empire. The victory against the alien forces was more than just a strategic win. It was the birth of a new era. The humans had proven themselves to be a force that could not be overlooked. And as the final remnants of the alien fleet drifted into oblivion, Captain Hayes stood on the bridge of the flagship, staring out at the wreckage. This wasn't just the end of a war. It was the beginning of something much larger. "Captain," Lieutenant Morgan said, breaking the silence, his voice filled with awe, "the galaxy won't be the same after this." Hayes nodded slowly, the weight of his words sinking in. She knew that their victory had sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The once dismissed humans were now the ones to beat. Their ingenuity, their strength, and their resilience had turned them from the underdog to the new rulers of the battlefield. The galaxy was theirs for the taking, but they had to be careful. Power came with its own set of challenges, and Hayes wasn't about to let her crew grow complacent. "We need to focus on securing the galaxy, not just celebrating this victory," Hayes replied. "We've earned the respect of the galaxy, but now we have to prove that we can lead." Meanwhile, Sergeant Carter and his team were making their way back to the human command center. The aliens were defeated, but they knew that their battle wasn't over. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. They were no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting for control. "Take a look around," Carter said, gesturing to the vast field of wreckage. "This is what we've accomplished. We've shattered the myth that humanity couldn't survive in space. But this is just the beginning. We've got a galaxy to rebuild." Mia, one of his squad mates, nodded. "We didn't just fight for survival, Carter. We fought for something bigger. We fought for the future." As the human forces began to secure the alien territory, the message was clear. Humanity wasn't just going to survive in the galaxy. They were going to thrive. The alien empires had underestimated them, but now, humanity would show them the true power of their will. Back on the flagship, Hayes was already planning the next phase. "Lieutenant, prepare a communique to the Galactic Council," she said. "It's time they learned the truth about humanity. We're not here to be anyone's second choice anymore. We're here to lead." The transmission was sent, and within hours, the message reached every corner of the galaxy. The humans had won. They had defeated the once feared alien forces, and they were now the dominant power in the galaxy. But Hayes wasn't about to let this new power go unchecked. She knew that with power came responsibility, and it was time for humanity to prove that they could handle it. As the message spread, the galaxy was thrown into chaos. Some species, who had once been allies of the alien forces, now found themselves questioning their loyalties. Others, who had watched from the sidelines, began to rethink their stance on humanity. The old alliances were crumbling, and the new order was emerging, one that would be led by the humans. Back on Earth, President Winters addressed the world. "We have won the war, but our fight is far from over. We must rebuild, we must unite, and we must prove to the galaxy that humanity is not just a species to be feared. We are a species to be respected." The world erupted in cheers. The humans had not only survived, but they had conquered. The power they had gained was vast, and the path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. Humanity was no longer a backwater species struggling to make a name for itself. They were now the leaders of the galaxy, and nothing would stop them from achieving their vision. As the human fleet began to expand, exploring new systems and forging new alliances, Hayes couldn't help but wonder what the future would hold. They had already proven that they could fight and win. But now, they had to prove that they could lead with wisdom, strength, and compassion. They couldn't let the fire of their victory burn them out. On the battlefield, they had shown the galaxy their strength. Now, in the corridors of power, they would show the galaxy their heart. Meanwhile, on the distant alien homeworlds, whispers spread. The once unshakable confidence of the alien empires was crumbling. They had learned a hard lesson. The humans were no longer the weak, scrap-built soldiers they had once thought them to be. The humans had risen, and they would no longer be pushed around. The galaxy was changing, and in the hearts of the humans, the message was clear. They had become the galaxy's new rulers, and the era of underestimation was over. As Hayes watched the stars outside her window, she knew that they had just begun to write their story. And this time, they were the ones holding the pen. The fight for survival was over. The fight for the future had just begun. The reign of humanity. With the last remnants of the alien resistance dismantled, the galaxy's attention turned toward humanity, a species that had once been a mere footnote in the annals of galactic history. Now they were the central force, the axis around which the future would turn. Earth, which had once been a distant, insignificant planet, now sat at the heart of an intergalactic empire. Captain Hayes, her crew, and the people of Earth had accomplished the unimaginable. But as the humans settled into their new role as galactic leaders, questions began to arise. Could they handle the responsibility that came with power? Could they govern an empire that stretched across countless star systems, each with its own history, culture, and political intrigue? On the flagship, Hayes stood before her crew once again, ready to chart the course for humanity's future. "We've shown the galaxy what we're capable of," she said, her voice steady, but filled with determination. "But the real work begins now. We're not just conquerors. We need to be leaders. It's time to build an empire based on what makes humanity strong: unity, resilience, and the desire to explore the unknown." Her crew listened, knowing that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. The aliens who had once feared them were now slowly rebuilding their forces, unsure of what humanity would do next. While some factions were eager to make peace, others were more suspicious, unwilling to let go of old grudges. Humanity had earned its place as the galaxy's dominant force, but maintaining that position would be another challenge entirely. Sergeant Carter, who had become one of humanity's most respected war heroes, found himself in a new role as well. His combat experience had earned him a seat on the Council of Advisors, tasked with helping to shape humanity's future. He had fought for survival, for victory, but now he was tasked with something even more important: guiding humanity through the complexities of galactic diplomacy. "The war's over, but the peace is just beginning," Carter muttered to himself as he stood on the balcony of the newly established human embassy, gazing out at the bustling galactic capital. The skyline was filled with towering buildings, ships of all sizes moving through the sky, and countless beings from across the galaxy going about their business. Humanity's influence was everywhere, but Carter knew that peace wouldn't be handed to them. It would have to be earned. Back in the halls of power, President Winters had called for a summit with the leaders of other galactic civilizations. The humans had been victorious, but they couldn't afford to assume that other species would simply accept their rule. Many would resist, others would be suspicious, and a few would actively plot against them. But one thing was clear: humanity would not be intimidated. "We've won the war, but now we must win the peace," President Winters said, addressing the assembled council. "We can't afford to be tyrants. We must build alliances, extend our hand in friendship, and show the galaxy that our victory was not about domination. It was about survival and growth." The first steps of humanity's new reign were careful but deliberate. The human fleet began to patrol the farthest reaches of their new territory, ensuring that the alien factions could not regroup and pose a threat. But they also extended invitations to former enemies, offering trade agreements, scientific cooperation, and a seat at the table in the new galactic order. Hayes, still on the flagship, watched as the first alien representatives entered the newly constructed human embassy. They had heard the rumors: humanity's quick rise to power, their triumphs on the battlefield, and their rapid expansion. But now they would face the humans firsthand. The humans weren't just warriors. They were thinkers, diplomats, and leaders. "Let them in," Hayes ordered, her voice calm but resolute. It was time to see if humanity's strength could be matched by their wisdom. The first representative, a tall alien from a species once considered an ally of the defeated empire, stepped forward. "We've heard much about humanity's victory," the alien said, their voice surprisingly respectful. "But we have one question. What do you intend to do with all this power?" Hayes met the alien's gaze. "We intend to use it wisely. Power without purpose is a dangerous thing. Our goal is not to rule over the galaxy. It's to ensure that no one ever has to fight a war like the one we've just fought. We will build an alliance, one where each species can thrive, where knowledge and resources are shared, and where peace isn't just a dream, it's a reality." The alien's eyes narrowed, but there was something in Hayes' voice that made them pause. They had expected arrogance, dominance, but instead, They were hearing something unexpected, a willingness to cooperate, to lead not through fear, but through strength and understanding. "We will see if your words hold true," the alien said, and with that, the first steps of peace were taken. As the galaxy adjusted to this new balance of power, Sergeant Carter couldn't help but think about the journey humanity had taken to reach this point. The war had been brutal, the losses immense, but now they were standing at the precipice of something greater than anyone had imagined. Humanity was no longer the species that had to fight to survive. They had become the species that would shape the galaxy, a beacon of hope and strength for those who had been oppressed, a symbol of what it meant to overcome the impossible. But with that power came responsibility. The humans knew they couldn't let the same arrogance and greed that had led to their enemies' downfall take root in their own hearts. The galaxy would watch, and the fate of the future would depend on whether humanity could lead with integrity and honor. As Hayes gazed out at the stars from the bridge of the flagship, she thought about the road ahead. They had won, yes, but now they had to prove they were worthy of the galaxy they had claimed. Their reign had just begun, and the galaxy would soon know that humanity wasn't just a species to be feared. It was a species that would change the very fabric of the universe. The future was theirs,